Greetings, fellow citizens of Disneyland. Brickey here. Today's adventure, Disneyland has finally been given opening guidelines from the state of California. And the news, it's not good. In fact, it's horrible. So just a brief update on how we got to this moment. Disneyland has now been closed 222 days. Since it closed on Friday, March 13th, voluntarily, as everybody was trying to figure out how to respond to the pandemic caused by COVID-19. And today, the reopening guidelines have been announced. Now, reopening guidelines are different than a reopening date. Before Disneyland can acquire a reopening date, they have to match guidelines that are provided by the state of California. So they were never looking for November 13th. What steps do we have to make as both a private business, speaking on behalf of Disneyland, and as a community, speaking on behalf of Orange County, more specifically, and generally Southern California? And before the opening guidelines were given out, earlier this week, Governor Gavin Newsom explained that California theme parks will be divided up into different groups, as he explained that not all theme parks are created equal. An example would be a small city park that has a Ferris wheel would be treated differently than a small city made of theme park attractions like Disneyland. We're going to break up the theme parks. It's not just one or two brands, it's many different parts that are part of the theme park industry. Now, for a while, I've been covering California's fear factor on reopening theme parks. I've been predicting where we are at right now today since the beginning of summer. It was not a popular opinion then when other YouTube channels were saying any day now they're going to reopen, but I've kind of always had a vibe that California, the state of California, just didn't want theme parks open. They just didn't want this potential public safety hazard on their horizon. Now, when I say this, I'm talking about the state of California, not my personal opinions. I'm projecting how I have read the tea leaves of the government through the news and through their own press conferences and their own quotes. So when you trash me in the comments below, I'm just telling you what I've read on behalf of the state of California, not my personal opinions. If the theme park opens tomorrow, I'm in there tomorrow. But it always has seemed to me that California had a fear factor on reopening the parks. And I guess I have to say the state of California, because when I say California doesn't want the park to open, people say, no, California does want to open. Stop splitting all the different words. When I say California, I'm talking the people that run California, the elected officials, not you and me. Technically, yes, we are part of California, but we don't control when the park reopens. But this fear factor to me has always been that they were afraid of what would happen during the winter months when people would not only want to congregate together for our ritual holidays of Thanksgiving, Christmas, people want to go out for Halloween, people want to celebrate New Year's, but also colder weather moving people indoors. There's also the cross-contamination of COVID having to live alongside influenza season, flu season. Like, it just seems sort of like a dodgy time of year that I have predicted for a while that they were just trying to avoid. And in fact, they did point out earlier this week that colder months and holiday gatherings were something that they were trying to avoid. This is an area of obvious and real concern. That's why we are very sober, and forgive me, stubborn about some industries in the state that I know are eager to get guidelines. If I break this down a little bit, when he talks about some industries that are eager to get their guidelines, eager is an interesting use of words, almost like these are industries that have been annoying us to get their guidelines, like been pushing us to get their guidelines. And in many ways, I feel like today's guidelines are California's pushback. Again, I hope one recognizes our stubbornness on a health-first, data-driven decision-making process is done with our eyes wide open on what's happening now around the world, not just what's happened across the United States. We are being vigilant and have to maintain that vigilance so we avoid any further increase in transmission. This quote kind of goes along with my theory that they've always just wanted to sort of ride out the clock, avoid having theme parks, stadiums open during these months that have always kind of been a really big concern. If America could get COVID flattened before the fall, everybody would feel better about going into what has been looked at as probably the darkest and most dangerous days of COVID-19, because by next fall, when the weather and the lifestyle patterns change, hopefully by then there will be a vaccine for those of us that believe in taking vaccines. That has also been very debatable in the comments below, which have been a wild ride these last couple of weeks. But I really feel like these quotes just kind of prove my theory that they're trying to ride out the clock and just let all of this pass, let the storm pass, because technically this fall will be potentially the most dangerous COVID time that we will have until we can get past this. But California has been making moves to go toward reopening the theme parks. And in fact, in the last couple of weeks, they have sent state officials out to the East Coast to visit Disney World and its operations. So sending state officials to open theme parks to observe them, to see what's going on, they are displaying a willingness to participate with theme parks. And in today's press conference, they talked about how they went out to the East Coast, they saw parks that were open, they saw things that they really liked, that they found encouraging, and they also saw some things that they felt like the state of California could improve upon. State officials have also visited a closed Disneyland and Universal Hollywood studios to see where the local parks are at with their safety protocols. So there has been movement on looking at the parks, both here and there, trying to figure out what the state of the industry is and what that safety concern looks like in real life, how this theory is actually being practiced. And I have to say, Disneyland has made the absolute most of their 222 days that they've been forced to be closed, making as much as possible of this downtime. They have continued their construction projects. Many are wrapped up or close to wrapping up. They have upgraded the entire resort, both theme parks, all 3 hotels in downtown Disney, to match public safety protocols. And most importantly, the thing that I've been talking about in these videos for months now, and largely because many of you informed me that this would be a big concern, they've made a deal with the unions. And making a deal with the unions that represent 90% of the unionized workers is a huge deal, because there had always been sort of an X factor of when Disneyland does get an opening date, how long is the space between that date and actually opening to the public, because in the bridge between those 2 dates in the calendar would be dealing with the unions, dealing with the non-union employees, getting the staff in and getting them trained. So Disneyland has done everything possible on their end to minimize that window of when they get permission to open to how many days later they can actually open their gates. With these 3 steps has minimized the time between getting their guidelines and reopening. And with an estimated revenue loss of $2.2 billion, they are itching to get the park open as quickly as possible. So today is when all of that got somewhat disrupted. California Health and Humane Services Secretary Mark Ghaly announced during a news conference today, Tuesday, October 20th, that amusement parks reopening guidelines have been added to Governor Gavin Newsom's 4-tier blueprint for a safer economy. I watched this live. I have to say, this was a bad day for anyone hoping that the parks would open soon. And I can only imagine for local businesses that depend on Disneyland and employees that work directly for the park, I feel for you, because I know as a fan, my expectations, which I've thought for a long time that the park probably wouldn't open till mid-21, spring 21. Today was pretty rough. It was pretty soul-crushing. And even though during the press conference, Mark Ghaly wasn't exactly specific, he just kind of talked about the difference between large-scale events and more contained events, really talking about the difference between theme parks and outdoor sporting events. He talked a lot about how stadiums offer better control of the guests, because when you go to a stadium event, like to go see a professional football game, you are given an assigned seat, which then would make it easier to do contact tracing if someone in a certain section was to come down with COVID-19. They also talked about how when you go to a sporting event, you are contained in your seated area. You would probably buy concessions from a designated concession stand, and it's more of going to see a football game, staying in one area for 3.5 hours. Whereas on the other side of that, When we go to Disneyland, I mean, we're just ripping all over the park. You know, you're going from land to land, attraction to attraction. So they really look at it as a sporting event as being able to maintain folks. Whereas going into a small city like Disneyland, hey, I want to experience every square foot of it every time I go. So this didn't fare well for their theory on public safety and how to reopen the parks. But they did say that as of today, smaller parks that have a maximum of attendance of less than 15,000 attendees could reopen at 25% of their capacity. But they threw out a very interesting rule to smaller parks opening that could be a huge question mark for the reopening of Disneyland. When smaller parks are allowed to reopen, they can only sell tickets in advance through a reservation system, no in-day ticket sales whatsoever. We were expecting that, but the curveball we didn't see coming, they can only sell tickets to people that live in their county. So if we were to use this example for Disneyland, if this is the same for larger theme parks when they open up in Tier 4, then that would mean that only people in Orange County would be allowed to go to Disneyland when it reopens, and someone like myself that lives literally less than 3 miles from the Orange County border could not go until LA County reaches that same tier of safety. That was rough for me to hear. So close, I can touch it. I mean, I can hear the fireworks from my home every night at 9:30. That's how close I am. Oh God, so close. But this all circulates together on what my theory has been for a long time. They just don't want huge crowds of people from all over mixing. And Mark Galley, he even said, a problem with a theme park is they have guests coming in from all different locations, doing multiple day stays. He also talked about when guests go to a theme park, they may be very influenced to follow public safety when they're inside the park, but then after a day of ripping Disneyland, and he didn't say this, but being high on the magic, one might go out on the town in Anaheim and just be in such a frenzy of getting to live a day that felt normal that you might be a little irresponsible when you go to your hotel or local restaurants or walk down the sidewalk. It really did indicate that the theory is correct, that they are just fearful of having a mass gathering of people from all different destinations that would just be hard for them to control. Now, in your comments below, which I always read, and some of them are really interesting and inquisitive and make me want to do more research, and some of them just seem flat out crazy. A lot of people keep saying, what about malls? Why can a mall open and not Disneyland? And my response to that, and seems to really match up with the math we got today, is your local mall might get a couple thousand people on a day of operational business hours. But those couple thousand people would be spread out over an 8 to 10 to 12 hour business day. When Disneyland reopens, the expectations are it will absolutely be sold out 7 days a week. So literally what I believe they are trying to avoid is having a place full of 15, 20, 25,000 people that is gathering that large attendance of people 7 days a week. Now you're going to say, what about Florida? Their parks are open and everything's fine. I don't have an answer for that. I can only tell you that Florida is a different state with a different governor and a different set of rules. And I have no answer for you on that. And once again, these aren't my rules. I'm relaying to you California's rules. But they did say something that I found somewhat encouraging. They said that they are learning from things now on how to adjust rules later. I do believe that there will be some sort of flexibility with these rules once we get past what they're perceiving as the danger zone, which is fall into winter. They said what they learn now could change the rules in the future, and they also said that they normally detect change in 3 or 4 weeks, meaning something that they implement today, they normally see how that change yielded a positive or negative result 3 to 4 weeks later. So if we look at these rules moving into the future, they could very well reshape how these guidelines maybe get adjusted once we're on the other side of winter. Members of the press pushed back and said, hey, this seems pretty impossible to make the parks reopen under these guidelines, in which Mark Galley pressed back. San Francisco has had a few neighborhoods that have been able to get into the strictest tier of public safety, so it is not impossible to go to yellow, but we're looking at a really big chunk of land, so some people have done it, but it does seem impossible. He also said that California is doing better than most states. They feel good about all the moves that they've been making, and they're going to continue to make strict guidelines, reassess those, and continue to make more guidelines as time goes on, as they can see how they are doing as they're moving through this weird moment in time. So the really bad news is this. At this point, it's going to be weeks or months before we can even imagine Disneyland being back open and earning an opening date. And at worst, it looks like we're looking at some sort of opening date in 21. I think somewhere around spring 21 will be the most accurate date to place your expectations. And without a reopening date, a specific date in which they can reopen, it makes it just impossible for the parks to plan ahead and to train workers. I mean, it's a mess. Quite simply, these guidelines created a mess for Disneyland. Because without a firm date, reopening date, the parks can't set staffing, training, ride testing, and visitor reservation plans. We need to get to the 4th tier to open Disneyland. And maybe your county needs to get to the 4th tier for you to be able to attend an open Disneyland. Currently, only 7 counties with a combined population of 238,000 citizens have reached the lowest risk of minimal tier. Southern California theme parks are located in 3 of the largest counties in the state, home to more than 16 million people. California counties can reach their minimal risk tier once they have less than 1 daily new COVID-19 case per 100,000 people and less than 2% positive tests. Guys, that's hard. That's really, really hard. So we get to this point. Would opening the park under these new guidelines even be worth it for Disneyland? And I'll be doing a video more about this in the future, but just as all of this is breaking today, one of the guidelines they just kind of slipped in there is only outdoor attractions can be reopened. So that would mean all of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, all of New Orleans Square, and more than half of Fantasyland's attractions couldn't open under the current guidelines. So even if they were allowed to open, all of those lands would be severely impacted with their major attractions closed. And Critter Country, half of it closed too. No Winnie the Pooh. And then as I was reading even deeper into the restrictions for attractions, they're worried about the speed of attractions, meaning that if an attraction goes too fast, would it potentially remove or blow off the face mask of guests riding it? That could mean that Radiator Springs Racers or the Incredicoaster could each be possibly not reopened or reopened to a slower speed. I mean, technically you could do the racers at a slower speed, but I think Incredicoaster kind of needs that big takeoff to just physically make all of the loops and corkscrews that it needs to because, gravity. And then what if Disneyland was given a go-ahead? Orange County gets to Tier 4. And in the time that they're trying to reopen and get the staff trained and make all the phone calls and get the reservation system going for us guests, that it then slides back up. I mean, what could this start stoppage look like? And what if they did get open for 2 weeks and then the county slides the wrong way? Like, there's no real thing to hold on to here. It's a sliding scale, and you're talking about a huge operation, thousands of employees, hundreds of secondary businesses, and lots of people just sort of in peril on which way the public health slides, which would lead me to believe, would it be worth reopening when you're not guaranteed to actually stay open and when you could only use a minimal amount of your attractions? I mean, hey, I'd go to Disneyland and pay top dollar just to sit on a bench. So you have my money, literally, like you have my season pass top tier money that I spent with you, and you have my money and I have no days in the park. But aside from that, even if they said no AP people, everybody pays, I would pay anything to sit on a bench with my mask on, smiling underneath my mask the entire time. The last month, Disneyland and local theme parks were really putting the pressure on Newsom to get guidelines. And in many ways, I feel like this is Newsom's clap back on, well, you want to keep pushing me. Here's your guidelines. Here are some impossible guidelines. Back on October 2nd, the state was going to announce the opening guidelines. Theme park officials got a look at the rough draft and said, please give us more time. And if anything, these guidelines are even more strict than the rough draft that they saw back at October 2nd. I mean, at least then you could go to the park if you lived 120 miles away, not this same county idea. And in that space, Disneyland has clapped back at the state of California. They've ran commercials. The pressure has been real on the state of California to get the park back open. And I kind of feel like this is a parent scolding you, telling you, I'm going to take away your iPad. I'm going to take away your iPhone. You're going to be grounded. You're not going to your prom. I'm taking your car keys. And then we all know eventually you get your phone back. You go to prom. You drive your car there. You know, I feel like there's a lot of heavy-handed threading here just to buy them more time, because they have clearly stacked the decks against the park's reopening. We don't anticipate in the immediate term any of these larger theme parks opening until we see more stability in terms of data. And obviously Disneyland is disappointed and they have already shot back. Ken Potrock, president of Disneyland Resort, said, "We have proven that we can responsibly reopen with science-based health and safety protocols, strictly enforced at our theme park properties around the world. Nevertheless, the state of California continues to ignore this fact, instead mandating arbitrary guidelines that it knows are unworkable, that hold us to a standard vastly different from other reopened businesses and state-operated facilities. Together with our labor unions, we want to get people back to work. But these state guidelines will keep us shuttered for the foreseeable future, forcing thousands more people out of work, leading to the inevitable closure of small family-owned businesses, devastating the Anaheim, Southern California community." Ken's a smart guy. He runs a Disneyland resort. He's seeing it just like I'm seeing. These are impossible guidelines. So why would they give you impossible guidelines? I know many of you think that Gavin's on some sort of like crazy power trip, and you've told me that he hates the state, he hates Disneyland, and he hates the citizens. I don't know, man. I just think that he's afraid. And if you could put yourself in his seat, you might be afraid too. I mean, I know there's other parks open and the rest of the country is moving on, but California is one of the few states that's not seeing the massive increase as we're going into this fall season. In fact, our numbers have kind of flatlined when everybody else is building. So maybe they're half right, maybe they're half wrong. But obviously Disneyland is not happy, and I understand, and Ken's seeing it the way I'm seeing. This is impossible. It has to be impossible for a reason. They're afraid. And the California Attractions and Parks Association has already mounted their response, and to say today's announcements on theme parks is disappointing would be a grave understatement. The governor has not used science or data to inform his decision. Theme parks have opened and operated safely around the world for months. Data and science prove that theme parks can operate responsibly anywhere. There is no rational reason to believe they can't do it so in California. No one cares more about park employee and guest safety than the parks themselves. Let me be unequivocal. The guidance issued by the Newsom administration will keep the park shuttered for the foreseeable future by forcing amusement parks to stay closed until their home county reaches Tier 4. The governor has issued a keep theme parks closed indefinitely plan, which will devastate California's major theme park industry. It's pretty serious. That's a pretty serious shot back. I don't think they're wrong. I think California Attractions and Theme Parks Association is making a valid point. I think Disneyland is making a valid point. This is my theory of where this is going. I mean, these people are smart and they can see that this is like a heavy-handed, you can't do this, we're not going to let you. To me, it only makes sense if you look at it as a stall tactic just to buy time to let holiday pass. I know I've said that several times, but really, that's the only thing that my mind keeps coming back to. So I'm still betting that once the winter months pass, the holidays get past us where everybody wants to get together and gather with their lost ones, because a lot of people are just fatigued. They just want their life to feel normal again. And also, once the political drama passes, something will get adjusted. It Feels like to me, all of this is a big, heavy-handed stall tactic. And it works out in their favor because if California does do well and the numbers lower, then the parks can reopen. But if California holds its current numbers and the parks stay closed, then they don't reopen. It's a win-win for state officials. It's like, well, if you guys can earn the impossible, we'll give you the impossible. But if you can't earn it, then you don't open, and then we don't have to deal with what we're afraid of dealing with. They are literally trying to buy some time for spring. I think that it's the only thing that makes sense unless you're willing to go down the rabbit hole that the governor hates the people that he represents. I refuse to let my mind go down that direction. But this is literally a stall tactic to let what is perceived to be the most dangerous COVID-19 months pass without having this magical place that we all love to go to and have 15 to 25,000 people there every single day of the week. It's a stall tactic. Expect political fighting to begin. It already has. And this isn't the end. This is the beginning of a shitstorm. My big hope is they don't stall too long and that the damage is minimalized as much as possible. And when they do let the parks reopen, as I'm predicting in early spring, that the tax incentives, that the way that they're able to rerun the money through Disneyland is a big IOU to help Disney and all the surrounding small businesses get back to profitability as quickly and as fast as possible. Friends, these aren't fun videos to make, but I feel it's my responsibility to bring a level-headed approach to everything that's happening. So till the next time I see you in Disneyland, I'll see you back here on the channel with more Disneyland news. Rough time to be a fan.